So how I usually like to start these conversations is about the individual's journey. It's always interesting how people get to where they are and how they get to work on these big sort of projects or companies or organizations that they're currently in now. And usually when I talk to people, they're, doing something that's going to take up a lot of their life's work, right? I mean, they're solving something that takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. So it's really a good place to start, I think, on how they got there. So do you want to kind of take us back maybe to after your sort of double masters and kind of where did that propel you from there? And then we'll get into MIT Solve.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'll actually even take you a little bit
Sure. Let's
further
do
back,
it.
if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because so my earliest memory of what I wanted to do with my life was to be a prosecutor and to put bad people in prison when I was probably 10 years old. And I didn't know anything about restorative justice at the time. I probably spent too much time looking at, Law and Order type TV series. And then maybe when I was 13 or 14, I decided I should rid the world of cancer and that I would be a scientific researcher. I was very good at sciences. So I ended up doing my undergraduate in biochemistry. And I even started a PhD around cancer research after 3 months or so of that PhD. And I sort of entered it knowing that it was probably not for me. I was sort of crying myself to sleep every night. And I decided to quit. There was the timelines in sort of scientific research and the type of work that you do day to day was just really not something that fit my personality, even if the objective and the outcome was obviously really great. And then I sort of didn't know what I wanted to do. I was 21 and I went to China to teach English because one of my friends was there, and I was fascinated by Asia. I applied for a master's in international relations, this double master's in Paris and in London. And that was partly because international affairs seemed like a good degree to do when you wanted to do good in the world.
Right.
But also partly because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was pretty broad after biochemistry being so specific. I thought, I can do politics and history and economics and all of that. I ended up specializing around conflict and security and especially like human rights type questions. And nobody would give me a job, unfortunately, working in human rights, or at least a job that paid decently. Sure. There's a few sort of unpaid internships where, I got lunch money or something like that. So I still didn't know what I wanted to do after 2 masters. And I joined a management consulting firm, BCG in London, because other friends joined those types of places and because they gave me a job and it paid well and I could travel. The good news is it was a great decision. I learned a lot. There were lots of smart people. It was interesting enough. And more importantly, one of their pro bono clients was Save the Children, which was one of my favorite organizations and still is the largest independent child's rights organization in the world. And I pleaded and pleaded and pleading with the person who's in charge of staffing to put me on a Save the Children case. And I kept getting pharmaceuticals and private equity and energy, that type of thing. And then finally, one day, she rewarded me and gave me a Save the Children case. And I did that for 4 months, met a team there that I really liked, was using the sort of consulting skills on that team. It was sort of a team of internal consultants. So did a case there for 4 months. And then I went back to BCG for another 6. But then they had a full-time position and I jumped on that opportunity to join Save the Children. I did that for 3.5 years. I was sort of an internal consultant, and initially I was doing more headquarter things, and then I really switched to supporting country offices. So then I was traveling all the time, 3 weeks a month to Pakistan, Cambodia, Lebanon, Jordan, Haiti. I went to China. I went to North Korea with Save the Children. So that was really exciting. And
was it food related? Was it refugee related?
No, it was so Save the Children does education, health, child rights, things like horrible things like child soldiers and things like that. What they call child protection. but I really was an internal consultant. So I was sort of going around the world helping different country offices with essentially moving their systems and processes into a new structure, which was Save the Children International in London. So it was really looking at finance, HR, legal issues. It wasn't looking at the programmatic aspects of the program.
Gotcha.
It's how it's run, how you manage $800 million worth of grants and building IT systems and things like that. That was my job. And it was fantastic. But after about 3.5 years there, I was traveling 3 weeks a month. And as I just pointed out, I was not doing any of the program work. I was doing everything but the program work. So although that was a fantastic experience, I wanted a change. I applied for a few jobs. I got a few jobs in Geneva. I thought Geneva was an extremely boring place to be. I got a job in New York working for the Clinton Foundation, which paid half of what the jobs in Geneva was going to pay me and 40% less of what Save the Children was already paying me. And despite all of that, I accepted the job in New York because New York was one of my favorite cities in the world and still is. And the work at the Clinton Foundation seemed really interesting. So I joined there in 2012 as a program fellow initially, and then ultimately I was promoted to director of program. I spent 4.5 years there, and I was in charge of all of the content, speakers, government relations for the Clinton Global Initiative. So putting on these big conferences and the big programs across several of them a year. And that was really fantastic. I got to meet everybody. I got to decide who everybody was in that sense. And we covered all manner of topics across, education, health, climate change, and everything you can think of on our stage. So that was really fantastic. And then a headhunter called at some point, 4.5 years in, and they talked to me about something at MIT called Solve that they had launched, but were looking to sort of find an executive director for. I'd never heard about it. I was not interested in moving to Boston / Cambridge to do this. I sort of told them, no, I don't want to move. And they said, no, they're ready to be flexible in location. Just, come and meet the team. And, a dozen or so interviews later, I remember a train ride back from Boston to New York where I phoned my mother and I sort of said, I think I have to do this, which was sort of reluctant, but also good in that I think it just seemed that everything I wanted to do.
What was it about the pitch?
Was in the job. Well, it's funny because across the 12 interviews, there were definitely lots of different visions of Solve. It was not like full alignment. We know what we want to do, right? But there was enough there that I thought I could herd everyone together. And interestingly, one of the exercises I had done for myself a few months back, so that's in early 2016 or so, and that I recommend people do. I have on top of Solve, I just launched this website called yourimpactlife.com where you can read about this, what I suggest, but it's basically, I wrote down my personal vision, mission, and values. So that's an exercise, right, that you typically do if you're an organization, and especially a mission-driven organization. You write down what your vision of the world you want to see, what is your mission, what are you going to do within that, and then your values. And you typically do that as an organization, right? But I had done that for myself. Interestingly, everything I had written down about what the world I wanted to see, what my place in it, and how I could affect change towards that vision and the values I respected were Solve. And they were Solve both because certainly what I heard was there was a lot of overlap, but also as I then took the job, I made Solve also into what my personal vision, mission, and values were in that sense. But it's funny that looking back at them, there's nothing I would change. And the opportunity to do exactly what I wanted to do in this case fell into my lap a little bit. But I was able to recognize that and able to get over the whole Boston thing to be able to to be able to take advantage of that.
So that's a great segue into Solve and what MIT Solve is, and just let's give just a broad sort of summary and overview. I know it has a lot of tentacles and it does a lot of things, but maybe its overall mission sort of is what?
So we're an initiative of MIT. We're not independent, and our mission is to drive innovation to solve world challenges. And really, we see ourselves as a marketplace for social impact innovation. People say, "Oh, are you an accelerator? Are you an incubator? Do you do prize challenges?" Mm-hmm. They compare us to a number of other things. But what I like to say is that, we need more innovation in the world, and innovation that really serves the most underserved communities and solves real problems for them. And, if you take the UN Sustainable Development Goals, you would people talk a lot about the $2.5 trillion gap, annual funding gap that is needed. We're not going to achieve the SDGs if we don't get all this extra money. But personally, I don't think that even if suddenly all the governments and the philanthropists and the big corporations of the world opened their purse strings and coughed up that $2.5 or $2.7 trillion, we would still solve these challenges. We also need new innovation and new ideas. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is there's not a good marketplace. It's not very transparent. And just like typical, I guess, entrepreneurship and who gets funded is typically not necessarily, people in Silicon Valley and people who have a tendency to be American and white, mm-hmm. and other things, and you're not necessarily creating a lot of transparency and a lot of accessibility for people. So really the idea behind Solve is that we're this marketplace and we fund and support innovators. So that's one side of the marketplace. And then we connect them with corporations, foundations, governments, multilateral organizations, i.e. the other side of the marketplace, mm-hmm. and people who have resources and who want to fund and want to support innovation more broadly. And we're the connectors, we're brokers or matchmakers in this marketplace.
Interesting. Can you give us some idea of what are some of the problems being solved or the innovation within the marketplace that is being funded, right? Or being brokered?
Yeah, so we have 4 pillars: learning, health, economic prosperity, and sustainability. And every year we set a challenge within that pillar. So this year we just announced the Solver class for 2020. It was on mm-hmm. September 29th. And for example, we had a challenge on sustainable food systems. Mm-hmm. And so looking at solutions that could promote like high impact protein, that could promote a number of other innovations in that space. We also had a challenge on good jobs and inclusive entrepreneurship, as well as health security and pandemics was another very big challenge. I'm sure that everybody is aware why we decided to do that one, but that looked both at near-term solutions to this current crisis, but also longer-term solutions to hopefully help prevent the next pandemic or even epidemics. So, and these are open questions when we launch them. Anybody can apply from anywhere in the world. You can be a nonprofit, a for-profit, an academic project, an individual. We do ask really that people have a prototype at least a working tested prototype, if not really a pilot that's running or be in sort of growth phase. So it's not a business plan competition. You have to sort of show traction, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then all the solutions are visible, and we have a number of judges, a diverse set of judges who then pick the most promising solutions.
And so the judges would be for different judges for each in particular pillar, correct?
Yeah. So there's generally, and you can see it again all on our website. One of our values is really this open innovation concept. So you can see all the solutions that apply. You can see all the judges. You can see all the criteria. We're trying to make it as open as possible, and we also crowdsource the challenges to some extent. So if people want to help us input on what challenge we should do for 2021. They can vote on our platform and they can input it. They can join different workshops to be able to do that with us. So we try and do that but yeah, the judges, you can see them. I'm looking, for example, at the girls and women, the Learning for Girls and Women's page, and we have the CEO of the Queen Rania Foundation. We have the Global Social Impact STEM lead for General Motors. We have somebody from the Obama Foundation, somebody from Microsoft for startups. We have somebody from UN Women, and we have a pastor. One of our Solver teams from a previous class comes back and now is one of the judges as well.
Have there been, I guess successes is a not the best term to use or best word, but has there been challenges that have not been solved? Because usually I'm sure the time horizon on this stuff is going to be decades long, but has there been progress through, individuals that have, applied for one of the challenge and received, funding and went off to obviously do some incredible things? Are there some examples that you could share around that?
Success is indeed takes years to be in the making, and the way we suddenly pose our challenges, they are pretty broad, and we don't believe that there's one magic silver bullet or technology which is going to solve this. So we don't give, one of the important things is we don't give the prize to one person. We select a class. So this year it's 5 challenges times 7 solver teams, so 35, but each class per challenge is 7 people. And so within that, we look at a portfolio approach, if you will, and seeing real diversity in terms of geography, business models, technology, what aspect of the challenge they're really zoning in on. So that, and it also means that you're looking at the performance or the impact of the class, not just, you're putting all your eggs into one, silver bullet basket, if you will. So that's sort of how we see it. There definitely, I can give you a couple of examples of solver teams that have done really well and grown well through our process. One of them, it's based in Indonesia, Ruang Guru Digital Boot Camps. It is, and I'm sorry to say this for Iman, because I don't think, I'm bastardizing it a little bit, but it's a online education platform similar. People will know about Khan Academy, and we just had Sol Khan at Solve Challenge Finals. So it does personalized content, but in this case, it's really tailored to the Indonesian market, right? It's obviously in Indonesian, but it follows the curriculum of the Indonesian government. It's in, that he has partnerships with the Minister of Education, different schools, etc. So it's not only something that you as a child uses, but it also helps with exam prep and with classroom prep. And so it really helps be an add-on to your, when it was in person classroom experience. And, it's really targeted to people who can't afford private tutors and private schools and a number of things, but want or need a complement to their current education. And that has grown tremendously over the past few years, and to reach sort of, I don't know where he's exactly at now, but tens of millions, or certainly above 10 million Indonesian children. What's interesting, and it's a for-profit, but Iman also had a non-profit arm to this, which was targeting more specifically out-of-school Indonesians and really people who were below grade and needed to sort of catch up, if you will. So he applied as part of the Youth Skills and Workforce of the Future Challenge, was successful. As part of this, he got an initial prize of $50,000 from Atlassian, which is a big Australian software company. They do things like Trello and things like that, and the Australian government. So that was an initial grant of $50,000, and then he got follow-on funding in the six figures, and now they've given him further follow-on funding, which is in the seven figures, to really continue developing that non-profit arm of it. So that's sort of a great success story for us, and it's sort of extended in a multi-year engagement between a government, a corporation, and an Indonesian hybrid startup, if you will.
Amazing. I like that you touched a little bit on the funding, because I wanted to talk about the range of sort of, capital injection versus grants versus equity. So like if someone sort of, applies for one of these challenges and gets accepted, is there a mixture of funding that is involved, right? Is it just strictly $100,000 check, or is it $800,000, but $100,000 comes in grants and another $500,000 comes from something else, but maybe they own 10% equity now? Like how does that work from a funding perspective for individuals?
It depends. It really depends per challenge. But for our global challenges, I mean, first of all, we say, if you're only after money, there's like easier ways probably to get it. Right. Than to apply to solve in one way. We don't want to see this, that the only thing you're looking for is funding. We really look also at non-financial resources and how we can support the Solver teams with coaching, mentorship, media exposure, right, and other things. But we know that social entrepreneurs, one of the key constraints is indeed funding in various ways. So we definitely seek to provide that. So in the last 3.5 years, we've brokered commitments of over $25 million for all our teams around the globe. That number is majority. God, that word. That was a big adverb for me. But in majority grant funding, even though just over half of our teams are for-profit. So we've got roughly half for-profit, half non-profit, with some in the middle, right? Some sort of, which are both. But most of the funding we've brokered at the moment is grant funding. So for-profit entrepreneurs, it's great. It's non-dilutive capital.
It's great, that's the best.
That's what they need. Yeah. But that is starting to evolve. We're getting more investment funding as well, brokered through the door. One of the biggest deal we've done for Temi, who runs LifeBank in Nigeria. Her startup is a maternal health startup around blood delivery to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. In that case, it's a mix. We've brokered the biggest deal we've brokered, several $1 million, and some of it is grant funding, and the rest of it is loan, so debt. And I think one of the things that we saw when we saw that we were not maybe getting as much investment funding as made sense relative to our portfolio, is we've started something called Solve Innovation Future, which is our own philanthropic investment vehicle.
Love it.
And how it works is pretty innovative in and of itself. We're trying to be innovators
Let's
whilst
talk about it.
supporting
Let's talk
innovators.
about it. Yes.
So what we do is we're still getting grants from our perspective. So you make a gift to MIT, so we get grants. But instead of then giving it out to the solver teams, which is what we have done and still do most typically, so we collect all this money from different prize funders and different sponsors, and then we grant it all back out that year, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we
Mm-hmm.
have to raise
Right.
more.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
We still collect the gifts, thank you to our donors, and then we invest in some of the for-profit solver teams, and it's held as a donor advised fund in Impact Assets, which is a vehicle that sort of only exists in the US. And so technically Impact Assets is actually the legal entity which then owns the shares, but we're the donor advisor. So we advise, we have an investment committee, and they review potential investments, and then we make the recommendations to Impact Assets on what investments to make, and any returns of these investments go back into the fund, go back into Solve Innovation Future. And so it becomes the idea, we haven't, it doesn't yet recycle, but it's going to start soon actually, is it becomes a pay it forward model for the solver teams, right?
Yeah,
If we're
absolutely.
taking a cut, if we're doing a revenue share agreement, or we're doing a safe, or we're participating in your seed round or your Series A round, when we get paid back, we can reinvest in the future teams, and maybe you'll be on the judging panel and you'll help select them. And then for our donors, it becomes a renewable philanthropy mechanism. Your gift, the lifetime impact value of your gift is multiplied because you're supporting this organization, and then your money will recycle back and support 2, 3, 4 organizations in the future as we go. So yeah, we started that last year, and we made so far we made 3 investments, and we're starting our new cycle as we just selected the new class soon. So we'll be doing a few more this year, or well, actually early next year.
I love that. I love that model. I see more and more, whether it's these nonprofits, sort of like incubators or accelerators. The whole time I'm like, you guys you're basically grooming like amazing founders, and it's a lot of these nonprofits could actually be fund, right, their own venture capital fund, so to speak, in a small way, and sort of not always be depending on donors, right, and always have to go try to get money from donors and keep having to go back to that well, where that's very cyclical, right, especially in uncertain times. People maybe are unable to donate like they normally can, right? So it's a very innovative approach that I feel more and more people should look at, for sure.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, definitely we also support nonprofits. The majority of our funding is still grant funding that we give out. And I also do think that, even for profits, it sometimes makes more sense to give out non-dilutive capital, especially these are early stage, and this is sort of R&D money and other things. So I definitely don't think that everything has a market, and everything needs to be profit enterprise. But I completely agree with you that I think it's about what's the capital that is most adapted, and how do you indeed maximize its use. And then hopefully with Solve Innovation Future, and we are starting to see that, we're crowding in more co-investors, if you will, and then whatever we invest in is multiplied because we've brought in other investors to the table. And so I think that's also, we're looking to be this marketplace, but to some extent to have a seat at the table to bring investors in it's good that we've become an investor ourselves, and that we then have a much better case to make to other potential impact investors.
And also you guys have one of the greatest pipeline of talent in the entire world, right? I mean, coming through MIT just in general, right? So does the Solve, future look at its own students coming out of MIT, right? And look at innovative ideas that are coming out of, whether it's a thesis or whether it's some type of project within a current classroom or current environment at MIT itself. Is that something that the Solve program will look at as well, is having this sort of incubator for its own talent coming through its own university?
So yes and no to some extent. So Solve Innovation Future is dedicated to investments in our solver teams. So you first have to be a solver, right, to then be considered for the funds. And then, but then students, researchers, alumni of MIT are definitely welcome to apply, but they don't get special consideration to get into Solve. I think currently maybe 10% of our portfolio, it might be less, it has some sort of MIT prior affiliation. So the large majority do not. And it's early days, but we are designing a program for young people under 24 that would include MIT students, but also again be open to both other students from other universities, community colleges, vocational schools, but also non-student people who, for whatever reason, are not currently studying but are under 24. So more to come on that.
No, it's great. No, I think again, it's always learning and innovating within its own organization, right? I think it's always good to look at different ways to make your own infrastructure, progress in itself, right? I mean, it's always, I think, a great idea.
Yeah. And there are some funds such as the Engine and also something called E14 that are somewhat independent but affiliated with MIT, which do look more specifically at the MIT ecosystem. So there are other opportunities for, and even there's something called Sandbox, for example, which is dedicated to MIT students. So there are other opportunities for students as well.
So I usually like to end a little bit on the future. And I know right now it's obviously a little crazy everywhere, and it's hard to plan ahead and have sort of goals and missions maybe written down because you just don't know how to go on right now. But what are you excited about, over the next 3 to 5 years, and what are some of maybe goals that the organization has internally, or what are some successes you would like to see in sort of that 3 to 5 year window that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think we really want to continue growing this idea of being this incredible marketplace for social impact innovation. But, what that means is definitely growing and changing as we go. I think that we're doing the global challenges and select this year we selected 35 solver teams. Last year was 32. But on top of that, we're also doing a number of challenges with partners. So they're more customized to different partners. So for example, we did one with the Inter-American Development Bank called the Rethinks Plastics Challenge, and then one with the World Bank around digital identity. And so we're doing more and more of these partner challenges every year. So that's sort of increasing our reach. And then, thinking about still this concept of the marketplace, you're trying to make deals happen and you're trying to support the innovators, but also the other side of the marketplace to be able to find deals, if you will. And so Solve Innovation Future, for example, is a tool in that marketplace to help investment capital flow more. I think as we go in the next 3 to 5 years, we're building new types of opportunities e.g., for example, this Solve program for young people under 24. We're building new challenges. We're building new tools. So I don't know what the next one after Solve Innovation Future is, but there may very well be a next tool to help around this. And then we're also trying to ensure that it's as open as possible. So, for example, we launched a course last year called Business and Impact Planning for Social Enterprises. And so it's a course on MITx. You can take it. You get a little MIT certificate if you pay the $49. If not, you can take it for free. But it essentially helps you do a business and impact plan for whatever your solution is. And that happens to be the application form to Solve. And the idea is that we're helping people who, may have not have done a course before on how to write a business plan, or may not have been part of another accelerator before. We're trying to help level the playing field a bit more for them. And so the more, that's again another tool to help this marketplace. And so as we grow, we're going to grow in like breadth, but also in that sense, we're going to add more tools, and that's growing in depth.
Well, thanks so much, Alex. I mean, I think it's really incredible what, MIT Solve has. So it's so early on still, right? And we're still trying to figure out.
It was my 4-year anniversary this week.
Nice. Well, congratulations. Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, I think we're at such a great moment in time where we're seeing sort of the evolution of technology, finally getting into some of the areas of the world where it hasn't tapped yet. Right. And we're seeing the power that scalability can have. And now as sort of the cloud sort of progresses, we don't see the first worlds benefiting from it. And that's what I think is exciting, is that, we're seeing, like, a perfect example was the Indonesia, education platform, right? It's like these companies aren't even possible probably a decade ago. Right. Yeah. At the sort of scale that they're doing, and sort of just the bandwidth you would need to even host the servers or something like that, right, in Indonesia and stuff. So I think that as we see technology, while a lot of the scope sometimes is to the negative of what technology can do, there's also these pockets of the world that, it's still so untapped for potential for people's lives to change, whether it's through education and hunger and poverty, and of course healthcare. That there's so much potential there that a little bit of funding and technology and innovation can change the lives of millions of people.
Yeah, and I think
unlike it could ever done before.
Yeah, and I do think that reflects, I guess, our values and our ethos that everybody and anybody can be a problem solver, and can make change in their community, in their country, in the world. And so, and obviously we're sort of showcasing these early stage social entrepreneurs, the most promising of them in the solver class. But in one sense, we're also trying to show that through the stories we tell and the programs that we run, that you too can be a problem solver. And in fact, everyone should be and needs to be a problem solver, because we really don't have any more time to waste. Some of the exciting themes also for next year that we're working on for potential challenges, but this is still really under development, so people can really input, and there's these voting and these workshops around. We're doing something on economic justice. We're looking at what is the classroom of the future, right? Maybe it's not a classroom. What is a safe and quality learning environment? Looking at, we'll repeat the health and security pandemics challenge, because we're still going to be dealing with this in some way, and certainly looking at longer term solutions for prevention is still important. We're looking at nature-based solutions to carbon management. And then also we're going to be hosting a challenge dedicated to the US, looking at anti-racist technology. So one of the things we've done, while we're a global organization and most of our challenges are global, we're doing more and more domestic work. And we started 3 years ago with an Indigenous Communities Fellowship. We're now doing a challenge on reimagining pathways to employment in the US. And then next year, we'll be doing something on anti-racist technology.
I love it all. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time. I know
Thank you for having me.
You're very busy, and I always really appreciate people taking times out their day to talk about the journey and what they're up to. So best of luck the rest of this year.